Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision. Like it feels almost like engineering, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it should be a math equation.
Exactly. You break your arm, the X-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at the illuminated screen and says, "Well, there it is."
Right. It's binary. It's broken or it's not broken. It's clean. And fundamentally, I think it's comforting.
Comforting. That's an interesting word for a broken arm.
Well, I mean, as humans, we like our problems to be visible. You know,
Yeah.
we like them to be categorized neatly. If I can see it, I can fix it.
Right, right. But then you step out of the X-ray room. You step into the world of navigating medical information or managing new
Oh,
medications.
yeah, that's where the math equation falls apart.
Totally.
Hmm.
You're trying to understand these complex disease frameworks your doctor just threw at you, and suddenly it's like that X-ray machine is just broken. We're looking at a landscape of information that is incredibly murky.
It's the Wild West out there.
Yeah.
Truly.
It is. I mean, think about the last time you picked up a new prescription. You unfold that massive, tissue-thin sheet of paper.
Oh, the one they staple to the pharmacy bag?
Yeah.
Like a CVS receipt of doom?
Yes, the CVS receipt of doom. You start reading the warning label, and somehow you end up feeling significantly more confused and probably way more terrified than when you started.
Yeah, it is the absolute definition of informational muddy waters. I mean, you are handed a document that is ostensibly designed to educate you.
Right.
But the reality is it reads like a legal shield.
Yeah.
It's written in this dialect of, like, clinical Latin and risk management jargon.
Which completely alienates the very person holding the paper.
Exactly. It alienates the patient.
And that shared universal experience of absolute bewilderment in the pharmacy aisle, that is exactly what we are tackling today in this deep dive.
It's such a crucial topic because we've all been there.
We really have. We're looking under the hood of a platform called iMedix, which is essentially trying to fix this broken system. They're completely overhauling how patient education is structured.
Right, by looking specifically at their educational resources, like the iMedix Guide to Understanding Cerebrovascular Disease.
Yes, but to be incredibly clear right up front for everyone listening, we are not here to give a medical lecture today.
No, definitely not.
We aren't going into the specific pathology of blood vessels, we aren't talking about atherosclerosis, and we are not dispensing treatment protocols. We have to be strict about that based on the sources we're exploring.
Right, we're looking at the architecture of the information itself.
Oh, exactly.
Because the way information is built fundamentally dictates whether or not you can actually use it. If the bridge is built poorly, you can't cross it, no matter how good the destination is.
I love it. Okay, so let's unpack this. The internet today, especially when you are searching for health information, it's a massive, completely unorganized
A
library.
very scary library.
A terrifying library. But imagine the medical section of this library. Half the pages are ripped out, others are glued together, and a significant portion of the remaining books are actually, sponsored by the very people selling the remedies mentioned in the text.
Yeah, the conflict of interest is staggering when you really look at it.
It's chaotic. If you type in a scary diagnosis, the first 10 things you see might be optimized by pharmaceutical companies or SEO farms just trying to sell ad space.
Exactly. It's not about what's best for the patient. It's about who bought the top spot on the search engine.
So in that environment, how does a platform like iMedix act as the trusted librarian?
Well, the key word there is trusted. And the source material we're looking at really emphasizes that trust requires structural independence.
Structural independence, meaning what exactly?
Meaning that in the landscape of medical information, independence is not just some nice-to-have buzzword for marketing. It is a critical functional requirement. If you do not have an independent lens, treatment questions and educational resources they become clouded by commercial bias. You can't avoid it.
Wait, let me challenge this independent filter idea right out of the gate, because I know people listening are probably thinking the same thing.
Go for it.
If iMedix is taking the manufacturer's raw data and, translating it into a narrative guide for the patient, aren't they just introducing their own bias?
Ah, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Right. Like, how is the patient supposed to know that this so-called independent librarian isn't just prioritizing what they personally think is important, which might leave out crucial data?
That is a phenomenal question. It really cuts right to the core of what medical literacy actually means.
Because translation is interpretation, right?
It is, but there's a vast difference between editorial curation designed to educate and commercial bias designed to sell.
Okay, walk me through that difference.
Sure. So when a pharmaceutical company produces a document, their ultimate fiduciary responsibility is to their shareholders.
Right. Legally, they have to protect the company.
Exactly. Which means minimizing legal liability while maximizing market reach. That introduces a very specific structural bias. They have to list everything so they don't get sued.
So it's not about clarity, it's about coverage.
Yes. But when an independent platform translates that data, their mandate, according to the operational philosophy we are exploring, is strictly patient comprehension.
So it's about shifting the allegiance of the document from the seller to the buyer, the patient.
Precisely. Handing someone a raw data sheet fulfills a regulatory requirement for the manufacturer. Check the box, we did it.
They can show to a judge if they need to.
Right. But true education, which is what this platform strives for, is about actively exploring the medical reasoning behind safety issues. It's about taking that raw, legally defensive data and running it through a filter of objective analysis.
So they aren't hiding the side effects.
Not at all. They're contextualizing them.
Okay, it's the difference between someone telling you the road is closed and someone explaining the road is closed because the bridge washed out, here is a safe alternate route, and here's why you shouldn't try to ford the river.
That's a perfect analogy.
Mm-hmm.
One is just a bare minimum fact. The other is actionable, contextual education.
And returning to your point about the internet being a broken library, that context requires neutrality.
Absolutely. Because if the person giving you the map is sponsored by the tow truck company that makes money pulling cars out of the river.
Oh, yeah, you should probably question the route they suggest.
Exactly. iMedix positions itself as that neutral map maker. They are exploring medication safety and treatment questions without that commercial thumb on the scale.
Which, if we are being honest, feels increasingly rare today. Because when you are confronted with a terrifying diagnosis...
Which is always overwhelming.
Always. Let's use the example from the sources. Cerebrovascular disease, which is this massive, intimidating umbrella term, right? You are in a state of high anxiety.
You're panicked. Your brain is not processing complex statistics.
Exactly. You do not have the cognitive bandwidth to also act as an investigative journalist, sussing out the bias of your information source while you're sitting in a waiting room.
You are in survival mode. You just want the truth translated into human. And translated without an ulterior motive.
Right.
That independent librarian doesn't care which treatment path you and your doctor ultimately choose. They don't make money off of drug A versus drug B. They only care that you understand the mechanics of the path you are on.
Okay, so philosophical independence is great in theory. It sounds wonderful on a mission statement in a corporate lobby.
Sure, it's easy to say.
Right. But practically, how do you actually display that? If I go to this platform, how does an independent educational resource physically look different than a highly polished pharmaceutical ad?
Well, the sources point to a very specific dual infrastructure, which I find really fascinating.
The machinery behind the mission.
Exactly. This is where it gets highly practical. The platform houses a dual structure. On one side, you have a comprehensive drug database. And sitting right next to it, you have these deeply contextual educational resources, like the Cerebrovascular Disease Guide.
So what does this all mean for the user? Because on the surface, those sound like completely conflicting ideas.
How so?
Well, a database sounds incredibly static and data-heavy. It's rows and columns, it's chemical names, it's percentages. But an educational resource sounds dynamic. It has a narrative arc.
Right, it tells a story.
Yeah. So how do these two completely different types of information architecture actually work together to help someone who is panicking at 2 a.m.?
It is a deliberate marriage of raw data and human context. Think of the drug database as the foundation of a house. It provides the necessary, unvarnished empirical facts.
Okay, I'm with you.
You need a place to find the exact dosages, the established half-lives of the chemical compounds, the known drug interactions. That is the concrete reality of the medication. But you cannot comfortably live on a concrete slab.
Right. It's structurally necessary, but it's completely inhospitable. You can't just curl up on the concrete.
Exactly. You need walls, you need a roof, you need plumbing. The educational guides provide that structure.
I see.
The database tells you what a drug interacts with. But the educational guide explains the underlying medical reasoning of why that interaction matters to your specific body systems.
I love the house analogy, but let me try another one. Tell me if this works. It feels like the database is the vocabulary, but the guide is the grammar that lets you actually speak the language.
Oh, that works perfectly. Reading a raw, generic drug monograph which, by the way, the source material is explicitly and aggressively against being compared to.
We should talk about that.
Yeah, but reading that monograph is like trying to read a dictionary from front to back to learn a new language.
Right. You will learn a lot of words, but you won't be able to order a cup of coffee or ask where the bathroom is.
Exactly. You have data, but zero functional utility.
Let's pause and talk about the generic drug monograph for a second, because the sources practically treat it as the enemy of patient education.
They really do. It's the antithesis of what they're trying to build.
Right. A monograph is essentially that terrifying folded paper we mentioned at the start, right? The dense, standardized document produced by the manufacturer.
Yes, it is a comprehensive scientific profile of a drug. It is written by clinicians, for clinicians, and then heavily vetted by corporate lawyers.
The lawyers are really the main authors at the end of the day.
Effectively, yes. It lists every single adverse event ever reported during clinical trials, regardless of causality, in a completely unweighted list.
Unweighted list. Let's unpack that, meaning everything is presented with the exact same level of urgency.
Yes. Whether it happened to one person out of 10,000 or 50% of people, it's just a bullet point.
It is an incredibly important document if you are a research pharmacist, I guess.
Oh, for a pharmacist, it's essential data.
Yeah.
But it is a functionally useless and often actively harmful document for a patient seeking understanding.
Because if you read a monograph, you see mild headache listed right next to spontaneous internal bleeding in the exact same size font, in the exact same bulleted list.
Yep. Right next to each other.
And as a patient, your brain just assumes they're equally likely to happen to you.
Which fundamentally breaks your ability to assess risk. Your brain can't compute that. And that is why the source directs the creation of these platforms away from the monograph model and toward a thoughtful, medically literate exploration.
It makes a lot of sense.
By creating a specific guide for a complex, heavy topic like cerebrovascular disease, the platform demonstrates a commitment to demystifying the intimidation factor.
Right, because cerebrovascular disease isn't just one thing, it's an umbrella term.
It's a huge category.
Yeah, if you just dump a database of vascular medications on a patient, you're just adding noise to their panic. But if you have a guide that walks them through the general mechanics of the condition, who might be affected, what is fundamentally happening in the body, suddenly the database makes sense.
Exactly. You give them the map before you hand them the compass.
You realize, oh, this specific medication in the database is designed to address this specific mechanical failure described in the guide.
You are contextualizing the threat and therefore contextualizing the solution. And this is how you teach a patient to actually converse with their doctor.
Which is so hard to do in a normal visit.
Right? Think about the standard 15-minute clinical visit. The doctor is rushed, you're anxious. When you synthesize the database and the guide beforehand, the patient goes from walking in and saying, my pills make me feel weird. Should I stop?
Which gives the doctor nothing to work with.
Exactly. But with context, they can say, I understand from the guide that this medication works by altering my vascular pressure, which the database says can cause dizziness. Is this the expected mechanism of the drug working, or is this a concerning side effect I should worry about?
Oh, wow. That is a radically different conversation.
Completely different.
You've transformed the patient from a passive subject to an active collaborator in their own health.
It democratizes the medical knowledge, but it requires the information to be structured in a way that the human brain can actually absorb and utilize. You can't just give them the dictionary.
But having this dual infrastructure, maintaining a rigorously updated database and writing these deeply contextual guides is incredibly resource-intensive to build. It's an enormous undertaking.
It's massive. It requires medical writers, data scientists, continuous updates.
Right, which leads us to a pretty massive question. Why is this level of detailed, independent intervention so desperately needed in the real world? Like, why go to all this trouble?
This is perhaps the most critical theme we are exploring today. The entire architectural effort of platforms like iMedix exists because people frequently, and sometimes very dangerously, misunderstand medication risks.
And here's where it gets really interesting to me. Because from a layperson's perspective, we are practically drowning in warnings.
You really are. We live in a warning-saturated culture.
Yes. We have warning labels on literally everything we consume. There are warnings on our coffee cups that the coffee might be hot.
Which, hopefully we knew.
Right. There are warnings on curling irons not to use them while sleeping. I mean, in medicine, every pharmaceutical commercial on television spends 60 seconds showing people walking on a sunny beach or, riding a tandem bicycle.
Always the tandem bicycle.
Always?
Or a kayak.
Always. while a voiceover speed reads a horrifying list of potential fatal outcomes. So let me push back on the idea that people are just ignoring warnings because they're stubborn. Are we just experiencing total information overload?
It is not just overload, though that is part of it. It is that the information we are given is fundamentally broken in how it interacts with human psychology.
Guess so.
Well, the way human beings process fear and risk is not inherently logical or statistical. We like to think it is, but it's not. It is deeply emotional and narrative.
So throwing pure statistics at a scared patient just doesn't work.
It rarely works. When you bombard someone with an unweighted list of warnings, which, again, is the fundamental nature of the traditional warning label or the television commercial, you actually break their ability to discern actual danger.
Okay, it's less like the boy who cried wolf and more like a car alarm.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Think about the 1990s. Car alarms went off so constantly for absolutely no reason, a heavy truck drove by or the wind blew, that we all just learned to completely ignore them.
Oh, that's so true. You just tune it out completely.
Right. If you heard a car alarm, you didn't think, oh no, a theft is occurring, let me call the police. You thought, I really wish my neighbor would fix their stupid car.
Yes.
The warning label has become a medical car alarm. It's making so much noise to protect the manufacturer's liability that the patient just tunes it out.
That is a brilliant analogy, and it perfectly illustrates the mechanism of failure here. Because patients tune out the noise, they consistently fall into two very dangerous psychological traps.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, they dramatically overestimate a minor, highly publicized side effect. This is driven by something in psychology called the availability heuristic.
The availability heuristic, meaning what's available to your memory.
Exactly. We are evolutionarily wired to fear what we can easily visualize. Things that are vivid stick in our brains.
Give me an example of how that plays out with medication.
Okay, let's say a patient reads a rare anecdote online about a medication causing a severe full-body skin rash. A rash is highly visible.
Yeah, you can picture that immediately.
Right, and it triggers an immediate primal disgust and fear response in the brain. They can picture it, so they assume it is a highly probable and immediate threat. And they might refuse a life-saving medication because of that vivid, terrifying mental image.
Even if the statistical probability of that rash is like 1 in 100,000.
Exactly. Brain doesn't care about the 1 in 100,000, it cares about the scary picture. And then the second, arguably much more dangerous trap is that they completely underestimate a severe silent risk.
Because it's silent.
Right. They might ignore warnings about a medication causing long-term hepatic toxicity, liver damage, or gradual vascular issues. Why? Because those systems are invisible.
You can't see your liver.
Exactly. The brain cannot easily visualize a failing liver in the same way it visualizes a rash. Because the threat is silent and internal, the brain downranks the threat level, even if the statistical probability of liver damage is significantly higher than the rash.
Wow, that's actually really scary when you think about it. And the traditional manufacturer's warning label treats both the rash and the liver failure equally, which completely bypasses how our brains naturally assess risk.
Exactly. The traditional communication methods, the tiny print on the pill bottle, the speed read commercial, they lack practical safety implications. They state the what, but they never explore the why or the how.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is exactly why the source material emphasizes that platforms like iMedix must focus on real-world patient misunderstandings.
Yes, they have to address reality, not just the clinical ideal.
Right, they aren't just trying to be a better dictionary, they are trying to actively correct a psychological blind spot.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you realize that the traditional regulatory or warning contexts, the ones dictated by law for packaging, are almost entirely designed to protect the manufacturer from liability. They're not designed to educate the patient.
That is such a crucial distinction to make. I think we all sort of know it, but hearing it out loud is different. A warning label is, at its core, a legal document. It is not an educational one.
Not at all. The manufacturer's primary goal with a package insert is to ensure that if a 1 in a million adverse event occurs, they can walk into a courtroom, point to paragraph 4, line 12, and say to the judge, "We disclose this."
Don't sue us. It was right there in font size 4.
Exactly. It is exhaustive by design, but exhaustiveness is the enemy of comprehension.
Because if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority.
Precisely. This is why the iMedix framework insists on exploring the medical reasoning behind the issue. Let's look at a practical example of how an independent guide changes this dynamic.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you hand a patient a bottle and the label simply says, "Warning," may cause dizziness. The patient might ignore it. They might think, well, I'm getting older, I get dizzy sometimes anyway, it's no big deal.
Right. They dismiss it because it lacks context. They think it's just a general catch-all warning.
But if an independent educational guide explains the mechanism, if it says, this specific medication artificially lowers your blood pressure to protect your vascular system. Because of this, when you stand up quickly from a seated position, gravity pulls the blood from your brain faster than your artificially relaxed blood vessels can compensate, resulting in sudden, severe dizziness and a high risk of falling.
Oh, wow. You have fundamentally changed their perception of the warning.
You have given them the mechanics. You have given them the why.
It's not magic, it's plumbing.
Exactly. And suddenly, the warning isn't just a legal disclaimer they can ignore. It is a practical guide to living safely with their treatment. You've taught them the practical safety implication. Stand up slowly.
That is the massive chasm between a regulatory warning context and genuine patient education.
It's night and day.
And because the regulatory systems are locked into their rigid liability-focused models, these independent educational platforms have essentially had to step in. They've become a necessary, critical safety net for the public.
They really have. Because the system isn't going to fix itself. So platforms like this are building a workaround. And that workaround is vital. The systemic failure in traditional risk communication leads directly into how independent platforms are attempting to reshape the broader conversation around medication safety.
It is not just about fixing one label on one bottle. It is about elevating the broader medication safety discussion entirely.
Yes, moving it from a monologue to a dialogue.
It feels like traditional medical warnings are exactly like the terms and conditions of a software update. You know, you get the pop-up on your screen, there are 70 pages of dense, unreadable legalese, and what do we all do?
We immediately scroll to the bottom and hit accept.
Exactly. We just want our phone to work. Nobody actually reads them until their computer completely crashes and they have to figure out who is at fault.
It's human nature.
By focusing on the why and the how, are platforms like iMedix trying to get us to read the terms before the crash?
That is a perfect way to frame it. They are trying to translate the terms and conditions into an actual readable user manual.
A user manual for your own body.
Exactly. And the key to doing that, as the source material points out, is fostering natural, thoughtful dialogue. True patient education cannot be a rigid, repetitive structure. It cannot read like a legal contract.
It has to feel conversational. Much like the format we are utilizing right now, a deep dive and exploration of concepts.
Because as we discussed with the risk psychology, humans learn through narrative. We learn through comparison and story, not isolated data points.
We do. And one of the specific strategies mentioned in the sources for elevating this broader discussion is the importance of comparing similar drugs or situations.
Yes, that's a huge part of their framework. This is how you build a robust mental framework for medication safety.
Let's walk through that. Give me an example of how comparing drugs actually builds a mental framework based on their philosophy.
Okay, let's say you are looking at an educational resource on managing a condition within the cerebrovascular umbrella. If the guide simply lists facts about drug A, that is helpful, but it leaves the information isolated in the patient's mind.
It's a single data point floating in a vacuum.
Right.
I know what drug A does, but I don't know if that's good, bad, or standard for my condition. I have no baseline.
Exactly. However, if the independent guide compares drug A to drug B, explaining, for instance, that drug A is an older systemic approach that affects the whole body and therefore has broader side effects,
Okay, making sense.
while drug B is a newer, highly targeted approach that might have fewer systemic side effects but requires specific biological markers to be effective, the patient isn't just memorizing facts anymore.
They are building a comparative framework.
They're understanding the landscape of their treatment options, not just looking at a single tree.
Right. When you compare similar drugs or explore different regulatory situations, you help the patient understand the trade-offs inherent in all medical decisions.
Because there's always a trade-off.
Always. Medicine is very rarely about finding a perfect, consequence-free solution. It's almost always an exercise in managing risk and reward.
Which is something a lot of people don't realize until they're in the thick of it.
By exploring these comparisons naturally and thoughtfully, platforms transform that passive patient, someone who just opens their mouth and swallows whatever pill is handed to them, into an active participant in their own healthcare journey.
And an active participant is a safer participant.
Absolutely. If they understand the who may be affected and why, they can monitor their own body more effectively.
Exactly. If they understand that drug A might cause a specific systemic issue, They know what symptoms to watch for.
They become an asset to their doctor's diagnostic process rather than just a subject being acted upon.
That is the ultimate goal of combining a comprehensive empirical database with a deeply literate, independent narrative guide. You are outfitting the patient with the tools they need to navigate a system that is, quite frankly, often profoundly hostile to the uninformed.
It really is a hostile architecture sometimes,
hmm
and not necessarily out of malice from the doctors or pharmacists.
No, usually it's just out of sheer complexity, time constraints, and liability protection from the corporate side.
The complexity is the barrier. These platforms are attempting to lower that barrier.
Or at least give you a ladder to climb over it.
So, what does this all mean? As we wrap up this exploration of how medical information is structured and delivered, let's tie it all back to why this matters for the listener right now.
I think that's super important.
We've spent a lot of time talking about databases and monographs and platform architecture, but let's bring it down to the human level.
It is universally relevant because health is universally vulnerable. We all get sick eventually.
Exactly. Why should you, listening to this right now, care about the structural philosophy of platforms like iMedix? Why does the difference between a raw data dump and a contextual guide matter to your daily life?
Because you'll need it one day.
Right, because statistically speaking, eventually you, or someone you love deeply, will have to navigate a complex, frightening treatment question. You will be sitting in a sterile room. You'll be handed a piece of paper that looks like it was written by a lawyer for a scientist.
The receipt of doom.
And you will be expected to make a monumental decision about your health or the health of a family member.
And in that moment, the quality of your information dictates the quality of your decision.
Yeah.
It really is that simple.
Yes. Understanding that there is a difference between a raw, defensive legal warning and a contextual, medically literate educational guide could fundamentally change how you approach your own healthcare and safety.
It gives you your power back.
It is the profound difference between blindly accepting a risk you don't understand and actively managing a treatment plan you do understand.
It is the difference between trying to navigate a dark, unfamiliar room by simply memorizing where someone told you the furniture is versus actually finding the light switch and turning it on yourself.
That's a great way to put it.
Independent platforms, with their dual structure of data and narrative, are currently the best bridge we have to demystify these incredibly complex diseases and the often misunderstood risks of their treatments.
It's about turning on the light switch. But, the technology of information is always moving, right? The internet is not static.
Always. The landscape of how we process data is shifting rapidly.
Which raises an interesting point.
It raises a very important question, actually. Something for you to mull over after we finish today.
Lay it on us.
If these independent narrative-driven platforms, with their curated guides and comprehensive databases, are currently the pinnacle of patient education, how might the integration of personalized real-time AI eventually evolve the very concept of the drug database?
Oh, wow. That opens up a whole new paradigm.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Could we one day soon see a world where medical guides are no longer static articles written for a broad audience, but living documents?
Living documents. What would that even look like?
Imagine an educational resource that is instantly rewritten and dynamically tailored to your exact genetic profile, your specific reading comprehension level, and your personal documented history of risk misunderstandings.
So instead of a guide explaining how a drug interacts with an average human body, it explains exactly how it will interact with your body based on your data.
Exactly. Imagine a database that doesn't just know the empirical facts of the drug, but knows you and builds the context around your life, your habits, and your biology in real time.
Like if you knows I have a tendency to panic about side effects, it writes the guide in a way to calmly walk me through the true statistical probabilities of my specific lifestyle.
Yes. We are moving from mass education to hyper-personalized medical literacy.
That is an incredibly wild and deeply hopeful thought to leave on. The broken X-ray machine of medical information might just get a massive upgrade after all. Keep asking questions, keep looking for the context behind the data, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.